Hi, everybody. Dave Walker again, co-founder and CEO of the B to SMB Institute. And in our effort to bring as many insights as we possibly can to the state of SMBs right now, to our B to SMB community, I'm really pleased to welcome our newest enterprise level member of the Institute, the Strat team from Accenture. Welcome, guys. Kevin, why don't you start first, introduce yourself, give us a little background, and then we'll move to Stephanie, and then we'll move to Seth.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having us. We're really excited to be here to talk about a topic that's very close to our hearts and obviously top of mind for many these days. My name is Kevin Yelitz, and I lead within our strategy practice, our software and platforms business. And in that part of our work, we work with leading disruptors to help them accelerate disruption, but also to help them manage change in their organization as they're on this hypergrowth journey. As part of that, we work with 3 different types of clients, all of whom are interested in SMB. We work with major platform players that many of you interact with every day. We work with leading later stage startups that are either pre or just post IPO to help manage their hypergrowth journey. And then we also work with investors in the space that are fueling the next generation of disruptors. And what's interesting is that SMB is a common thread woven through all of those. So I have my colleagues, Seth Schuler and Stephanie Gorski here today, and we're going to walk you through really interesting research that we've done recently on the state of SMB, particularly as it pertains to COVID. So I'll hand it over to them for introductions.
Okay, Seth, would you like to, or Stephanie, either one of you, would you like to go?
Sure. So Seth Schuler, also from Accenture and managing director. I, like Kevin, work mainly with software and platform companies. I've had a long history in consulting, and I've been a senior executive at T-Mobile leading corporate strategy and corporate transformation.
All right, and Stephanie.
Hi, everyone. Very nice to meet you all. My name is Stephanie Gorski. I'm a managing director, just like Kevin and Seth, in our software and platform strategy practice for Accenture. I've had the unique pleasure of supporting a lot of enterprise clients with the discussion of how they support SMBs better, and it's still a never-ending journey and an exciting conversation to have to support you all. So we're just excited to be here today.
Well, listen, our pleasure to have you guys today, and I'm going to turn it over to you and let you take us through the survey that you did recently among small businesses, and give us just walk us through what some of the results of it were.
Yeah, no, thanks, Dave. I mean, coming on the heels of COVID, we saw a lot of our clients on the West Coast really struggling, right? Even the biggest of the biggest players, when the economy started getting shut down in March, they started to see their business fall off. And, even the biggest players, while we all think serve mainly enterprises, SMBs are a big part of the digital advertising, digital solution space out here on the West Coast. So we decided to do some research to help people understand, despite the challenges that everybody is facing, where are there opportunities to be helping your clients succeed in these really, really challenging times. So we did a piece of research where we surveyed 500 SMBs, both the United States and the United Kingdom, to really understand how they're responding. And our goal was to really de-average their condition, not just to say everybody's bad, because we knew that not to be the case. And it was really to identify opportunities to help them with the challenges they were facing. So to set the stage, we know in the United States, SMBs are about 44% of the economy. And broadly, they faced a lot of challenges, but what we found is these independent business owners remain very, very optimistic. They've responded and continue to respond by reducing their labor costs, shifting their marketing spend, and fundamentally making what we would call a multi-year transition to moving online in weeks and months, not years. But with that, what we have found, because so many SMBs are local businesses and they serve local communities, they had to reach new and existing customers in really new ways. And much of this study was really focused on digital and digital marketing. And one of those big issues that we think you and all your partners are facing is, how do I reach new customers? How do I tell them I have new products? How the environment that my business is operating requires a ton of communication and a ton of digital capabilities to work more effectively. So in that, maybe not as relevant to everybody on this call today, but how are the platforms, whether it's Google, Facebook, Snapchat, helping businesses really understand how they can reach customers and get their messages out? And we're going to kind of walk through a little bit of the survey of where we think there's some opportunity and where people should be thinking as they move forward. So our approach was pretty straightforward. The work was done early May, but we've done some double checks to find that, frankly, not that much has changed. We've reviewed basically every survey that was out there to understand, to make sure that we're coherent and cogent with every piece of work being done. And we did a lot of statistical analysis. And what we really were looking for was 5 things. What are the challenges and impacts? What are the behavior changes that we see? What's their outlook? How are they using different ad platforms? And fundamentally, rethinking segmentation, given COVID is, you can't always think of customers the same way, right? The world moves, you can't just use yesterday's segmentation. And in this case, what we really started to find is that, unsurprisingly, but good news, some businesses are really thriving. And we decided to use a view of whose profits are growing, staying the same, or shrinking. And we also balance that against their digital maturity index. So if we flip to the next page, just to give everybody a sense, we always like to demonstrate that our research is relevant to everybody. We got a good mix of everything from very small SMBs to larger ones. The age of the businesses varied from very new to over 50 years. They've spanned a whole bunch of industries. And the only area where statistically we were a little surprised is the respondents to this 500 end survey skewed male versus female. But it's a good data set, and it's very aligned with stuff that we're seeing out of the US Census. So I think one of our key observations out of this was, despite the massive adversity, and frankly, when this was done, was literally coming off of all the shutdowns, that 78% of SMBs reported that their customers remain loyal and supportive, that they believe that they will quickly return to COVID sales volumes, and that when this was done in May, 42% thought they'd be going to the movie with their families in less than 5 months. So we would argue this is pretty optimistic behavior. When you balance that on the right-hand side, when you're going to look at just U.S. government statistical data, 80% of SMBs only survive their first year, and about 33% make it 10 years. So you need a really strong optimistic mindset to be a successful SMB, given the challenges that you face. With that, let me hand it off to Kevin to go into a little bit more detail on some of the survey findings.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a few key headlines that came out of the study, as well as what we believe is a net new segmentation. We're going to walk you through both of those, and then we'll double click into some of the unique behaviors of each segment. First and foremost, SMBs have been quite responsive to what's required to change their offerings to be relevant in this new world, particularly SMBs that have historically been focused on brick and mortar sales and what it takes to bring that into the future. Over half of SMBs have made that shift, and we believe this number will accelerate as COVID drags on. What's interesting, though, is that we found that 85% of SMBs actually believe that they need to accelerate this change in order to reach new customers. So we found that some of the behavioral shifts that COVID has driven is actually making SMBs sort of future-proof their business, if you will, as to what success is going to require going forward. So as we talk to SMBs, we were really interested in understanding how their online relationship would change with all of their stakeholders. And what we found is that SMBs obviously want to create much more of an online relationship with customers, but they're also starting to think about this shift to online as something that touches both their suppliers as well as employees. So this is something we're going to keep our finger on going forward and expect these numbers to increase further as we continue to live through this COVID situation. If we go to the next slide, this is sort of the complication, right? There's an aspiration to move all facets of the SMB operation to be more digital. The problem is that SMBs today broadly lack these capabilities. So as we look across what the main constraints are that SMBs identified to moving their business online, one, and this is still something we're all trying to figure out, is just how do you run a business that typically might have been in a storefront to work from home? And then there's a series of other components that SMBs need and consume that have not necessarily always been top of mind to sort of digitize. And that ranges everything from CRM to HR to supply chain. So we expect SMBs to be looking for better solutions to basically drive these functions digitally and online than before. I think the other thing that we would point out here is attracting new customers and reaching new customers is something that's totally changed if you're historically a brick and mortar business. And there's a decent share of SMBs that are really unclear how online advertising will better perform to help them reach new customers and fill the top of the funnel for them. And then finally, there is a decent number of SMBs, 24%, that actually believe their customer base is best reached offline. So we think this creates an opportunity for service providers and those that work with SMBs to help bridge this gap to reaching those offline customers and bringing them online. What we found is that there's really 3 different segments of people that are doing this and how well they're doing this. So as we looked across the SMB landscape, we found 3 segments that emerged from the study. And it's really all based off of profitability increase over the past several months that COVID has been in our lives. Somewhat surprisingly to us, but we find this to be a very positive thing, 25% of SMBs are actually winners coming out of this. They've figured out a way to increase profits during COVID, and they're continually investing in their business to make it more digital. And interestingly enough, this is a trend that if we looked at about a year ago, we would have found that there's actually a gradient of SMBs that are digitally ready. And it does appear that these SMBs are really accelerating and winning and potentially even taking share from other SMBs that aren't quite as prepared during this time. The next segment are survivors, and this is our smallest segment, but there is a group of SMBs that are somewhat digitally inclined. They've made investments to bring some of their business, both interacting with customers, but also operating the business online. And they're doing okay now, but they're looking for opportunities to become winners out of this. And as COVID drags on, we expect there to be a little bit of growth in this segment from some of the stragglers, and we'll talk about that in a second. But also we expect some of these survivors to come winners that are successful. And then finally, nearly 2/3 of SMBs are in this straggler bucket. And this is obviously something that's not overly surprising, but on the whole, this represents SMBs that have not been quite as prepared to move their business online and to operate in this new virtual world in which we live. Interestingly, though, this group is very eager to adjusting their business strategy to sustain themselves through this time. So I think as we look at this as someone that regularly advises companies that support SMBs, we think there's quite a bit of hope, candidly, in the fact that there's a segment of SMBs that are doing well. But there's also a lot of opportunity to help the bulk of SMBs that aren't surviving this quite as well really get to what they need to look like in order to be successful in the future. What we're going to do now is I'm going to hand over to Stephanie. We're going to double click into each of these segments to help bring to life what the challenges are and what the opportunities are for each.
Absolutely. Thanks, Kevin. And I'm really excited to dive into these because anytime we look at a new segmentation, really, we've talked so much at a high level about SMBs before we dived into this segmentation. And it's truly about meeting an SMB where they're at and a personalization aspect. So the segmentation that we're diving into now is about how do we really make sure we are meeting SMBs what they need in the strategy at the time. So let's start with the winners. So we saw some characteristics that popped out that were really impactful. We saw them increasing their marketing spend over the past 2 months. So when COVID hit and this was happening, they really did double down in some of that marketing. And they were really moving more towards advertising online. They were picking up pace and how they thought about that and leveraging where people were at on their buying journey in the process. They also had a little bit of different outlook. They were making capital investments. They were investing really in where they needed to go and thinking about the future, not only where they were at the time now. And they were doubling down on really meeting new customers and picking up the new offerings. They still were looking for additional capabilities, but these were higher level capabilities than what some of we're seeing with some of the stragglers in the process or the survivors. So when we overall think about the winners, it wasn't just the digital maturity, it was also the outlook and where they were investing their time, their focus, and their money. And that was something that was a moment of really differentiating them, and also differentiates how we help and support them over this time. As we think about going forward into the survivors, there was a lot of maintaining. There was a lot of weathering the storm. I like calling it the weathering the storm group. They were hoping to bunker down and hold tight and hoping that COVID would pass over. And there was uncertainty of how to move forward and less inclined to change the business. There was needing to have more support across the board. I think even from talking to more of those winners in the community about how to be supported and what to think about during this time. So they kept their marketing budget the same. They did move some, 33% moved some to more advertising online, but this was slight in certain areas. And then they was do nothing around the social distancing. The capital investment was small, but they did change. They did not plan on changing or launching really new products during this time, a vast majority of them. So you see a lot of consistencies around this survivor group of truly making sure that we kept with the norm, we kept with moving forward. So there's a lot of education or support that could be done during this time for this group. And I would say, Kevin said it was our smallest group, but it was also a group that we found to be harder to break into, because the last group that we got into around the stragglers were really looking for help anywhere they could. And this is what I love about talking to you all as a community. It's about supporting each other in this time. And this straggler group was looking for information, support, connection anywhere they could. And I would tell you, when we talk to our enterprise clients, this is not only is there new ways to support that winner group around segmentation, but there's really some things we could double down here and add advice and add really additional layer on top of the products that these software and platform clients are positioning to really leverage that holistic business support for SMBs, which I don't think anyone's really thinking about enough today. So they reduced the straggler group, really reduced and maintained the marketing budget, but they were open to how did they really think about change. They were open to what do they really think about how to reach new customers and new offerings, moving more online. Are there other options about bringing in the talent, the support, the other constraints that they needed to during this time to really build their business up? They just needed they need the right advisors. They need the right connection points to make that happen. The do nothing, I do want to highlight the 33% of respondents say they will do nothing differently and hire back the employees. A lot of that we thought was, not only is it show the great connection that SMBs feel for their teams and their support in their community, but it's also a lot of goes back to the, what do we do to change this? We know we need to bring back our employees, but what else do we need to do to make this different for us? So this led us to believe that there's not only a lot from the rest of the community for SMBs could do, but also our enterprise clients can do if we are targeting stragglers in the right ways by these segmentations to really help them through the journey and give them a little direction. With that being said, there's a lot to sum up. We have a lot more details around, but I'm pass it up to Seth to really bring us home. Oh, Seth, you're on mute.
Sorry. 4 imperatives to support SMBs. Unfortunately, the COVID environment has not gotten all that much better. And we think that the solutions of the future are going to be more digital, right? We're seeing lots of, buy online, pick up at store, pick up at curb. So our sense is the 4 things are really about how to be digital. Many customers have not been digital. So what are the tools? How do we need to understand how to use things like ad platforms and other technologies like really CRM to really understand how to manage a customer base that is digital, that you're going to be communicating through, whether it's email or chat or social platforms, not just face-to-face in a storefront or a business operation. Now, if you're new, that's great, but there are already those who are digital. And I think what Kevin, when he showed all those challenges, the work from home, CRM, data analytics, typically Accenture works with the biggest companies in the world. And frankly, these are the same problems. The skills and capabilities that the big find, the small find as well. And I think the challenge, what we believe that SMBs need to do is working together and their partners is finding the right companies that really can help you. Whether it's big companies or little companies who have the right both technical, marketing, and delivery skill to deliver customer insight. How do you take all the data that you have, just like large enterprises, and turn it into new products and new services? How do you use it to target customers? And very importantly, we would argue how to be more and more self-serve and improve your customer and your market education. I mean, one of the challenges that we see broadly is that so much e-commerce capability is targeted and designed for the biggest customers. So how do you deliver and enable simple e-commerce solutions that deliver the baseline really well, leveraging the tech talent and the CRM constraints that you're under, right? It's don't overshoot, but it's really deliver on the brand promise as narrowly as needed to deliver great experience and go from there. And then I think lastly, I mean, the point here is we're talking about digital advertising, but all SMBs for all their investments is how do you really make investments in the products, services, and solutions that are going to grow your business, you know, whether that's new technologies for product or marketing or delivery. And I think there's a challenge. I mean, I think we know working with ad platforms and working with other suppliers, really understanding the value of every dollar is really hard. And I think you need to push your partners, your vendors, and your employees to really make sure that you're getting the most out of every investment dollar you're putting in. So with that, Dave, I mean, we're happy to answer some questions. I know we kind of
I'll try and channel our audience and ask the questions that, you know, kind of frankly come top of mind for me at least. So first of all, do you think that I love the segmentation, by the way. I love the fact that you answered the question that I think is top of mind for many B2SMB marketers at least, which is, wait a minute, the segmentation or the proxies of value that I have used, you know, traditionally are kind of thrown out the window. Financial health, size of business, who knows how many employees they've got now. All of those things are kind of thrown out the window. What do I do next? So I love the identification of segments by basically their health coming through this. With that said, do you think that the investment commitment in each of the segments, particularly around advertising, is that a leading indicator of willingness in other categories, do you think, to make that kind of investment? In other words, is that a story that applies to other tools that they use that they need to migrate digitally? Does it apply to other investments that they need to make in their business? Kind of that proportional willingness.
Yeah, I think it does, in the sense that digital advertising requires a level of data and customer analytics that if you can't do it for customer, you're going to be challenged in other spaces. Mm-hmm. So I think it is an indicator. If you're really struggling with digital advertising, you're probably also saying you're struggling with data and analysis.
Mm-hmm. And you're probably struggling with, you know, are you doing all of your finance up in the cloud? Have you really enabled your e-commerce capability? Have you matched to the level of what would be just acceptable to most consumers, which unfortunately is Amazon. But you know, are you doing those things? So I think that's really important. Conversely, the constraints and the expectations that you guys identified, do you think those are relevant? Those proportions are relevant in each segment to other things that small businesses may feel constrained by?
Yeah, I think it is. And what's interesting, and I would say that our findings are very relevant to product teams that are building products to help SMBs either find more customers, get more out of their customers, or run their business more efficiently. But what we've seen historically is many SMB owners are experts in their business, which is why they have a company. But they're not necessarily experts in financial accounting software, HR software. So the customer segment and the sales portion of things, which obviously is indicative of digital advertising spend, is always priority number one. But enabling the other business functions that make a company successful ultimately does become a priority. And we think it's important for providers of those services to help inform SMBs to get them there.
Stephanie, question to you. Do you think that there's never permanency to a survey? You know, you should never assume that this is going to last forever and this is, you know, always going to be this way. But do you think as the recovery happens over the course of the next 18 months, that many of these kinds of snapshots of the different categories, which may change proportionally in size, that these characteristics will probably hold pretty true, especially based on how you've seen since May and now? Yeah, they held pretty steady.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. So we did this. I mean, you saw when Kevin was presenting it, we did these this was based on correlation of digital maturity. It wasn't just based on spend specifically. So it's really, when we look at the segmentation, we're having people lead more into digital maturity with the pandemic happening. So those numbers will change about how many companies actually leaned into that direction as SMBs got more comfortable with just becoming digital. Everything you explained earlier is cloud, what they're leaning to in advertising. So we'll see the numbers change in what proportions, but we will see these segments be something we can look at and reflect on and compare across the next couple months. The piece that I love about the segments and the path we went to, and you hit this at the beginning, was number of employees are thrown out. You know, how long they've been around, which was actually a big segmentation before, of how many years means you weather the storm, doesn't necessarily actually fit anymore. It's truly about how they're operating today. And we talk so much with our enterprise clients about meeting SMBs where they're at on their journey. And so now there's so many different factors that go into this, that it's truly about what we're talking about now is refreshing this constantly. It's got to be a real time feedback on segmentation and where SMBs are at, not specifically a one-time evaluation.
Yeah, I think, Dave, some of the work that Kevin and I have been doing, just looking at behavior changes, we're never going back. You know, shop online, pick up in the parking lot, that's here to stay. You look at all the different states that have changed laws where you can now meet an attorney or an accountant by video, and the use of things like DocuSign, that's here to stay. So I think we have progressed probably 2 or 3 years of digital maturity in 6 months. We're not going back. I'm not saying people aren't going to stores, but there, especially in the service provider space of SMB, Zoom and Teams is going to be with us in ways that we never would have expected, you know, just 6 months ago.
Yeah, and Seth, I love that point too, because it's with everyone. It's not just SMBs, it's consumers and it's enterprise companies. We're seeing the same thing across the board.
Yep. So you guys have been living with this research. I'd love to hear from each of you on this as we wrap up. You've lived with this research now for months. I mean, I know you've presented it lots of times. Does it leave you with a sense of bullishness or pessimism or not so sure as you really think about the future of small business? Jump ball, anybody can take it first.
I mean, I think for people who are already in that winners and have a winner mindset, I think this is going to be one of those great flushing in and out opportunities. There are going to be plenty of winners who are going to figure out how to operate, and they're going to come out of this much stronger. Those that are not comfortable in digital, I think are going to really be challenged. I think from our large clients have really started to rethink about SMBs as even a bigger opportunity than they did last year this time.
That's interesting. That's very interesting. I would concur with that. Kevin, how about you?
Yeah, I would say I'm generally positive. I think it's heartening to see SMBs and just their level of resilience in figuring out a way to make it through this. The flip side of that, though, is if we were to conduct a study where we tracked the same SMBs over a quarterly basis for a year out from COVID, let's say, there's no doubt that we're going to see a large share of SMBs that just say, I'm folding up shop, right? And I think that creates really an imperative, frankly, for us as a community, but also as service providers to help SMBs be in the resilient bucket rather than the close up shop bucket. And the importance of that, you all know this, right? SMBs drive the largest number of jobs in the entire US economy. So the resilience of SMBs is actually the resilience of our economy. So while it's not entirely rosy, there's certainly some glimmers of hope.
How about you, Stephanie?
Yeah, I think we were all optimistic or positive when we received the insights back from the survey and started really digging into the information. The piece that Kevin used the word resilience, it's fundamentally what continues to come to mind. The piece that always I continue to, in addition to what Kevin and Seth said, come back to is also how much there's still a desire to improve and grow has been so impressive to me. I mean, again, we talk to enterprise clients all the time, and we have to push sometimes for them to change and grow and move in some direction. COVID's helped with that, but it's sometimes an effort.
Yeah.
SMBs are doing it willingly and excitingly. And it's just, that's fundamentally exciting for us, and exciting for us to push enterprise customers, which honestly, they've been more willing to think about SMBs over the last couple months than ever before. And so we're seeing a lot of positive, proactive momentum instead of reactive and for us forcing them kind of momentum, which I think is really exciting.
Concur on all of you, with all of you. I mean, I am bullish. I mean, I am hopeful, and I'm particularly hopeful that B to SMB enterprises are actually waking up and realizing we have to do things differently. Compelled to do things differently. Thank you guys so much for doing this. I hope you come back. I hope you come back frequently. Absolutely. I know that you guys are going to be an absolutely terrific pipeline of information into our community. And I invite all of our members to reach out to you guys directly as they really are trying to figure out all the different challenges that they're trying to figure out that bubble up from their small business customers. So thanks again for doing this, all of you.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.